That brings us to the first production of the day, which will be a video which Reg Adkins will come up and talk about. There was a group of Aero Club members who went down to the farm and retrieved Jimmy Woods' Avro Anson and brought it back for the Air Force Association. So Reg, if you'd like to come forward. Reg needs no introduction. He's been around a long while. Everyone knows his face and his background, so there's no need for me to tell you all about it. Reg, thank you very much.
This is an early silent Super 8 movie. I bought a Super 8 movie camera in the 70s and they were only silent, there wasn't any sound. And eventually I transferred it onto a video cassette recorder, and later on Alan turned it into a DVD. And we're off down the track. I was going to take 5 minutes before this started, but we're off down to, you watch the movie and I'll tell you all about it. In 1976, Frank Cox was doing a cross-country leg from McCundy into York, and he became a bit unsure of his position in the vicinity of Mount Bakewell. And whilst trying to get back onto track, he spotted an Avro Anson minus its wings lying in a paddock. He found the owner, Lou Sargent, who didn't want to part with it until Frank promised to get him a copy of Norman Brearley's book, Australian Aviator, signed, and so he did. So we're down on the farm, and this is a general view of the state of the aeroplane. You can see it's in pretty bad condition. It's been there for yonks years and been played with by the kids and been summers and winters, and the fuselage is all fabric covered, as you probably know. Not a bad shot of the cockpit after all those years. Quite a lot of stuff on the panel, and it was a big project to lift it up and bring it home. And Norm Jodrell, who was president of the Aero Club at the time, volunteered his services with Freighter Trailer Industries to provide a couple of trucks, semi-trailers. Frank Cox was organising the whole thing, and rounded up a bunch of volunteers from the club, and it was Norm's object to present it to the AFA by way of the Royal Aero Club of West Australia. When they found it didn't have any wings on when Frank found it, and they were eventually found located. And here we are with the two big semi-trailer you might have noticed. You'll see in the Chev Blitz buggy wagon with the crane. These are all donated free of charge. And if you see the trailer later on, you can see the very rear of it's almost touching the ground because of the overhang to take the fuselage. So they strapped a few old tyres underneath just as a bit of a bumper along the road. It turned out it was going to be an easy job. We're going to get down there about 9 o'clock, get the thing on the trailer, have a bit of lunch and come home. Well, that didn't happen because they found that they had to separate the fuselage from the wing stubs with the engines. And that took a little, that's Frank walking around there now, organising things. And it became a hard job because it's amazing how many miles of plumbing and wires and cables there are running through an aeroplane. And here's initial chance trying to raise it up. It won't come away, so out comes the toolbox. So now we've got to get digging with this, fellas. We've got to pull this apart, which they proceeded to do. Took quite a bit of time. Let's get my pages up here for about 5. As it so happened that day it would turn out to be very hot, and it ended up being 42 degrees, and we're all still out there at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was just mind-boggling. It was so hot. Fighting with a recalcitrant aeroplane that did not want to be torn apart by a bunch of nobodies. lining the trailers. Well, I was still working my hair, got the multi-grips out there, and I've got wire cutters and bolt cutters, and a big American spanner, one of those big hammers that you belt, trying to belt the main wing bolts out with. I all might have seen the shot of the girls. The girls were supposed to be the social committee, and they were all in their nice little shorts and tops, and they were all hiding under the trees in the shade. So I'd like to bring all these work-safe nonsense people here today. And you just watch these blokes up and down on this thing. No trouble. A truck driver driving a semi, all we knew him as Blue the Mad Truck Driver. And he said, look, he said, I don't care what you say, it's no trouble, leave it to me. And he just went about getting it. There's the girls under the shade now. And he just went about directing on the operation to get the fuselage off the wing stubs. There's Norm Jodrell in his yellow hat, giving orders as usual, and opening up the nose cone. I think they used to put luggage in there, didn't they? So, and you might have noticed the truck coming in was loaded with old tyres, and they were to be cushioning effect for the wings and the stub wings and the fuselage when they finally got it onto the flatbed. It took a long, long time to get this thing apart. I mean, you could have taken great hacksaws or chainsaws to it, just ripped it apart, but they were trying, as all these recovery crews do, try to maintain it so that there's a great possibility of it being restored later on. And so this continual grinding away in the hot sun and the wind, there's bloke there with wire cutters going, bolt cutters. There's a couple of panels there that I suppose they would have been able to restore them. They're a bit hard to read at the time. You can see all the old fabric flapping away in the breeze where it's all disappeared. There's another one like this, was given to Fairbridge Farm School by MMA when theirs were taken out of service, and it ended up exactly the same after a few years out in the open, and the kids playing on it, was kids too, a few vandals. And this one was lying on the ground. You can see it's come up so high now that the wheels are starting to drop down. Still hauling away with the crane. Yeah, Frank had spotted the aeroplane, and he went to Lou Sargent, who'd bought it, and didn't want to sell it. And Frank said, look, we want to give it to the AFA to restore, and the patron is Sir Norman Brearley. And when Lou Sargent heard that, he said, could you ever get me a copy of Norman Brearley's book, Australian Aviator? And Frank said, yeah, I could, Lou, and look, would you like me to get him to sign it for you? So Lou said, yes, please, and here's the aeroplane. So he gave it to Frank, but Frank had him draw up a legal document just in case for later on, which turned out to be a wise move because somebody wanted it back later on and they didn't get it. So here we are, we're up in the air, finally got it apart. There comes Blue with his big truck. You can see Norm standing under the crane there, just so I don't drop it on him. See the bloke on the nose? Work safe, where are you? Well, by this time we're nearly dying, so hot. You can see blokes there haven't got his shirt on. Well, they finally put this. I cameraed all this, I probably went to sleep there. For now, they've got this fuselage on the truck now. And then there was the famous wing stubs with the propellers. You'll notice the bloke here pulls the propeller blade round, dresses it horizontally, which turned out to be a bit of a worry later on. The one thing you don't do with a single engine prop is dress it horizontally. So this is all pretty precarious too, because the thing is swinging under its own weight. They're trying to pull it on, settle it onto the bed on the truck. One of the ladies there leaning home, there's a youngish girl died, like when she seemed to know what she was doing. She was giving orders and pushing it to try this, try that. So she was really keen. No, I did. This is how dangerous it was, but they obviously had to swing it round to make it face the other side, because they determined that the load would be a bit too wide going forward, so with the fuselage and the wing stubs, so they had to separate it so they could put them both on both trucks, if you get what I mean. So yeah, they're now taking off, heading for Perth, and I think we did actually go down to the river and have a quick lunch. And there's under the trees on by the avenue or whatever it was. And then it was off home. You can see it's getting a bit darker, so the day was wearing on, and off goes Blue. And the truck there's some of the outrider, and we're following up behind. And I think it's Norm Jodrell there driving. No, that'd be, don't know, one of them. So we're coming into Mundaring, and it was a pit stop because everybody was just so worn out that we pulled up at Kalamunda and found a local deli, and we all went in and raided the place and got everything we could and drank everything we could find. And then some nice vintage cars there, heading off through the wilds of Kalamunda, off down to AFA, and here's a bit of a thunder, you see a bit of thunderstorms there with all the rain coming down. It's getting fairly dark now, and we're in the AFA yards at Bullcreek. You'll find a shot shortly of the Mamatus cloud which was hanging around overhead, and there was a big danger of thunderstorms and lightning with the way the weather was. Must be going on 6 o'clock by now. And now the other thing is to get the thing off and place it down on the ground in the whole AFA holding yard as a, well, that's where it was going to stay till the AFA took it over. Sooner or later you'll see a lot of yawning going on. You'll see Norm Jodrell there give a delightful, great yawning standing under the Spitfire watching the last efforts. There's the Mamatus cloud. You can see how bad day it was. That's very hard turbulence there with Mamatus. Commonly called Mamatus because it resembles the mammary glands, and that is its meteorological name. By this time the sun had sunk, the job was almost done. We delivered the historic remains of one of Jimmy Wood's Ansons to the AFA's holding yard. There's Norm, you watch Norm have a big yawn.
He was practicing talking.
He didn't need to practice. So you can see the fuselage there. As it turned out, the aeroplane was, I'll just get out. The aeroplane was absolutely useless as to be restored because it was so far gone. And the one that you see in the Aviation Museum now is the one that George Lewis had. And that was a good one because when it was decommissioned, it was stored in a hangar. So it was completely protected for all its life, so it's in good condition. They did a long job getting it off the trucks and back on. So in May, they had an official opening ceremony at the AFA when the logbooks were handed over to Sir Norman. Bob Allen was the embassy. Norm Jodrell handing the logbooks to Sir Norman, and afterwards he was taken on a tour of the aeroplane in the yard. Don't forget he'd been CO of 4SFTS at Geraldton during the war, and they operated mainly Ansons, so he knew all about Ansons. And after the actual ceremony here, he's accepting on behalf of the AFA, and don't forget he was also founding president of this Aero Club. So they took him on a tour, an official tour. There's Frank, Sir Norman, and Norm. And Norm would have flown Ansons. He ended up as a Lancaster pilot in Bomber Command just about the end of the war. Fortunately, he was a lucky one to survive. Got there a bit late. He did a few trips, so there'll be a bit of nostalgia for him too. So I'm going to preempt you. As they bring Sir Norman round from the back to the front, he walks his head straight into that horizontally dressed pot. And it's not a stage shot. I just caught it. And that's why that proves you should always dress your prop vertically. So there's all the credits. Thanks a lot to Alwyn, who put a lot of these credits on. I did the original. I think it still lasted. We've still got the film. What more can I say? That's the end of it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Reg, for that bit of history. If you just bear with me for a moment or two, I've got some still shots of Avro Ansons, and it'll reflect back on Jimmy Woods in those days. So just hang on for a second.
Well, one is running and the other's a cutaway version, and they had them both up at Pierce at the air show. But a lot of parts went to New Zealand to help restore the one that they've now got in the air. Some parts of this were sent over there. So this is what restorers do. They swap parts all around the world. And there are a few bits and pieces of it over in the Jimmy Woods terminal at Rottnest.
President Reg, when did Jimmy Woods cease flying to Rottnest?
When they banned him from, I quite frankly can't remember. It was in the 50s, wasn't it?
65, I think.
65, no. Woodsy, I think it's known in history, Woodsy was getting on a bit, but he was a do it all himself, and he kept going, and they couldn't stop him. The only way they could stop him was by grounding all the Ansons in Australia. That's the only way they stopped him. And besides, the aeroplane was past its use-by date. It was all glue from wartime, and the glue was giving out, so they settled two birds with one stone.
I've got a sheet out of the Rottnest newspaper, and it says here it's May 1956, by which time it had done 13,000 crossings to Rottnest and back.
Could you imagine how many times somebody had to wind those bloody wheels up and down with a hand?
And don't forget, for a few of our visitors here, it was the world's shortest airline, 12 nautical miles.
I think it was 142 winds to get the undercarriage up. When you got them up, it was time to start bringing them down again, another 142.
148.5.
148.5, okay, revised number.
How often did you do it? Jimmy Woods, I went over Rottnest once with him, and he said, "Do you want to become a part of the crew?" And I said, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "Slide the wheels down."
Up there are the two aircraft. WAC was the Islander and WAB was the William of Laming. I'll whiz through these fairly quickly. The Islander, that was the family that owned the farm, and that was the day that it arrived on the farm, and the family and Jimmy had the photo taken. Oh, sorry.
Did he fly it on?
Yeah, he flew it up there. And that's Jimmy shaking the hand of the little boy that lived on the farm. That's him there, getting a handshake. that's it. Maybe the same day or a day or two afterwards, and then the rot set in. All of these are the Islander. And that's a photo of a Reg and the recovery. Not Reg, but the day of the recovery, by the look of it. And that's the official crew that went up to do the job. Frank Cox, Norm Georgeville, Sir Norman Briley. It's them again. And that's the nose restored at the AFA. That's it at a shopping centre. And then the other Avro was WAB, Whiskey Alpha Bravo, which was the Willem de Vlaming.
That was owned by WA Boring Company.
Ah, was it?
Yeah, and I flew in that quite a few times.
Okay. So that's it. And had a brake problem that day, so they all swarmed out to do something about it. And that ended up on a farm as well. Which farm did that end up on? Noengarup, right. So that also ended up deteriorating. And so I thought I'd just do that. There's Jimmy Woods' Mosquito when it was in good nick. That's it in the end. That's one of his Ansons in the end, and another one. So you could say he was Woodsy the Wrecker.
That aeroplane WAB, which stood for WA Boring Company, was owned by a gentleman called Bob Odgaard. He was the Danish consulate of Perth, but he also had a water boring manufacturing company. And I flew with Bob a few times. We went up north once and we parked the aeroplane, and when we came out in the morning, the cows or horses had put their feet through the tailplane, and I was lucky to find some flexible wire and tie it all together, and we flew home, which we probably shouldn't have done when you think about it. The undercarriage on that plane was an electric up and down one, so that made it easy. And I knew exactly how much air was in the main tyres, because every time I got out there, Bob said, get out the pump and go stand and pump them up, because they were big tyres, but they were quite soft if you didn't use them. And take the bottom plugs out of each engine and let the oil run out that had accumulated there if it hadn't flown for a while. So, and another time we went over to Rottnest in it. Bob said, there's my boat down there, I just sold that. And as he opened the window, the whole damn rot fell out the side. And we came home to Guildford Airport, because that's where he kept it. And it was a pretty windy show, I can assure you. But the same aeroplanes, they used to leak like a sieve if you got into heavy rain, I can tell you that. You needed an umbrella and a raincoat on to keep dry. Well, that's about all I can say about WAB, but that was my early days connection with that thing, and that was before I really learned to fly.
Thank you, Leo.